I'd like to dedicate this session to the D family, to Marcy D, who lost her life together with her daughters, Maya and Rena. And over the few days, and of course, Lucy, and over the few days we were in Israel, had a chance to sit down with Leo one-on-one to talk with him. It's a remarkable, remarkable family with having suffered a terrible loss. And on Yom HaZikaron, I, together with Ilana, our daughter's family, we went to the cemetery at Gush Etzion, and at 11 o'clock, there's the tzvira, there's the siren, and it's a Kohen-friendly cemetery, so I was able to get pretty close to the graves of Lucy, who's, of course, was Leo's wife, and his daughters, Maya and Rena. And there was a tekes, there was a ceremony, and after the ceremony, what you'll see now are the daughters, Maya and Rena's friends, around the grave, and it speaks for itself. So Shuli will be kind enough to put that up, and I wanted to dedicate today's shiur to the family.
Working on it. Oops. Are you able to hear the sound at all?
Yes.
Those words, Hazorim B'dima, those who sow with tears, Birina Yiktzoru, they harvest with joy. And I keep thinking of a beautiful rabbinic teaching found in the Yalkut Shimoni, which is a late midrash, probably 9th or 10th century, which is pretty late, maybe even after. And in this midrash, this rabbinic teaching, a father and a son, and it could have been a mother and a daughter, a father and a son. They're walking through the forest day and night, and the son turns to the father and says, Abba, Abba, Eifo Hamedina. Father, oh Father, where's the city? Where's the state? And they're walking and walking, and the son keeps asking that question, Eifo Hamedina. And finally, the father very warmly and lovingly turns to the son and says, Bini, Bini, my son, Kishetire et bet hakvarot. When you see the cemetery, Teda, you should know, when you see the cemetery, you're on the outskirts of the city. And there's hardly a city in Israel whose outskirts does not have a cemetery. And in that cemetery are those who fell, making possible the land of Israel. And I know that my dear Jessie is on the phone, and all the way back, it's more than 40 years, Jessie's brother-in-law gave his life in the First Lebanon War in 1982. I still remember you're taking me to your brother-in-law's father's home to make a shiva call. And what I remember him telling me is he was in deep sorrow. And when I said, Hamakom Yenachem Etchem, he explained to me that for him, Hamakom was the place, wasn't God. It was Israel. This place was his only nechama, his only comfort. Now, of course, Israel is a place of choose life. That's a foundational message of Judaism, where God says to us, behold, I place before you at Achayim vet Hamavet, choose life. And Israel is pulsating with life. But still, just a few days after Yom HaZikaron, I wanted to share that video with you and to dedicate these comments, which will deal with Eretz Yisrael, Medinat Yisrael, from the Parshiot we've been reading. I wanted to dedicate this to the D family and to all those who have made the ultimate sacrifice so that we can have a land of Israel. Our point of departure is one of the most esoteric portions in the Torah, and that is the portion of Mitzorah. It deals, believe it or not, with leprosy. As a matter of fact, Mitzorah, probably the definition as leprosy is imprecise. It was some kind of skin disease that it's hard for us to, with a particular science, to understand. But in this portion, the Torah tells us of a time when the Israelites, Am Yisrael, will settle the land, and they'll tell the Kohen the following. They'll tell the priests the following. And here we're picking it up in a portion we read just a week or two ago. And this is Leviticus chapter 14, sentences 34 and 35. So let's see what it says. Again, if you have a Bible near you, it's Leviticus chapter 14, sentences 34 and 35. And so here's what the text says. Tavo el eretz Canaan, asher ani noten lachem la'achuza, v'natati negat sara'at bevet eretz achuzatchem. When you come to the land of Canaan, which I give to you as a portion. If I shall place a mark of leprosy on a house, that is, on one of the houses in the land of your ancestral portion. I'm reading now from the Steinsaltz commentary. Although the various forms of leprosy are somewhat similar in that they involve the appearance of a mark and are all included in the general framework of the laws of leprosy, it is obvious that a mark on one's skin is very different from a spot found on a garment or on stones. And the next sentence, Uva asher lo habayit. And the person who owns a home or is renting a home or is living in a home, v'higid la kohen lemor, and he tells the following to the priest, kinega nir ali babayit, something like a mark seems to me to be on the house. I'm going to say those words again. Kinega nir ali babayit. Now, when we read this sentence, this is so far from the pulsating narratives, the exciting narratives of the book of Genesis, of Breshit, or of Shemot. My God, what are we doing? We're coming into the land, and I walk up to the walls of a house, and literally I say, I see a plague in the walls of the house. What is this about? So first, a mystical thought before I get to what I really want to say today. Mystically, now here we have to move beyond our scientific one-dimensional thinking. Our actions not only affect other human beings, but this text could be saying that our actions can also affect the walls of a house. There is a Hasidic Rebbe, this sounds very Hasidic, the Sfat Emet, he was the third Ger Rebbe. I'm quoting the English of his writing. He says, the real meaning of these afflictions of houses is in fact quite wondrous, a demonstration that Israel's holiness is so great, they can draw sanctity and purity into their homes. You know, there's some truth to this. I remember many years ago, I'll give the specifics because it's a beautiful story. My sister Tova, whom, as you know, is a brilliant writer of fiction. Her new book, a compilation of her short stories, is coming out now. She wanted to call it Too Jewish, but the publisher insisted on a different title. I think it's called The House of Love and Prayer, believe it or not. They lifted it from one of the stories of Shlomo's House of Love and Prayer in San Francisco. So she was staying with us one Pesach, and she was staying in the home of our dear friends Debbie and Howard Jonas. And they were living then in a very modest home. And Tova said to me, there's something about this space, the walls, they must be a very loving couple. She felt something, whether it was the way the home was decorated, the pictures, or the walls itself. I know that sounds like I'm ready to be committed to some kind of psychiatric ward, but I think there's some truth to that. And that's what the Sfat Emet says. And the reverse is possible. That's the way he's understanding our sentences, that our negative actions can defile walls. The plague of Torat can fall upon our houses, that plague of the skin disease. Sometimes we can feel this phenomena in our own lives, a kind of energy we experience when entering a home. The walls can sometimes cry, sometimes hopefully dance. Sometimes they reflect division, and hopefully, sometimes, most times, all times, let it be, they reflect love. You can just feel it. And so that's the Hasidic understanding of this text, that there's leprosy not only on the body, leprosy, and again, I'm using the word leprosy loosely because that's not the exact translation of Torat, which is an acronym of Motzi Shemra, one who slanders. I'm not going there, but there's something that could even affect our clothes, the Bible tells us. It could affect the walls of our home. And the framework is when you come into the land of Israel and you look closely at the walls, you're going to say, Gewalt. There's something wrong with this place. Something terribly wrong with the walls of this house and beyond. Something wrong is abound in the land of Israel. There is a negative. And I love that phrase, near, is it near eh? He says, I'm looking at the text, near all li babayit, not near eh, near all. It seems to me that there's a nega babayit. And I was looking all over the Tanakh in writing a piece recently that some of you may have seen. Is there another near all li? Is there another phrase, it appeared to me? And indeed, using the internet, I found it, the concordance. And so let's take a look at Jeremiah, chapter 31, I believe it's sentence 2. And we're going to see another near Ali. Let's see what it says. It says, chapter 31, is it sentence 2? Maybe it's, there it is. No, it's sentence, is it 2? Yes. It says the following. Meirachok Adonai, I can't see if it's near eh or near ah. Is it near ah? Can anyone see it? I think it's near Ali. The Lord saw me from afar. There's that.
It's pasuk gimel, Rabbi. It's the third pasuk.
It is the third pasuk. Are you
At
sure?
least in on Sepharia, it's the third.
Whoa, Julie, we have to correct that. I want to take a look at this quickly. Yirmiyahu, but you can see there's a Nir Ali. I have my whole Tanakh here, so I'm just opening it up very, very quickly. And here's what it says. No, interestingly, I have it sentence 2. Anyway, Meirachok Adonai Nir Ali. Notice the difference. In the Bible, the person is described as entering into the land of Israel and looking closely at the walls of the house in Israel, looking closely at what's going on, because you can take this and interpret it. It's not just that you're looking at the house, you're looking at Israel. And the person looks closely and says, Gewalt, nega babayit, there's a plague in the house. But if we look in Jeremiah, here's what it says. Meirachok Adonai Nir Ali. The Lord appeared to me, the same phrase, from a distance. And then it says, Ve'ahavat olam ahavtich. And looking from a distance, God declared, I love you with an everlasting love. I'm going to repeat that again. From a distance, the Lord appeared to me and said, I have loved you with an eternal love, if I can face everyone. Now, normatively, that sentence in Jeremiah is understood within the framework of time. That is, God says, over the span of the centuries of the millennia, that's the Meirachok, We've had some tough times, but over the times, there have been some very wonderful times. And indeed, my love for you has endured. The Jewish people is Am Yisrael Chai, alive and well. I'd like to understand this sentence, not from the perspective of time, but spatially. What does spatially mean? Spatially means just what it means. It means that God is saying, I look at you from a distance of space, from a distance of place. And in doing so, I declare my love for you is an everlasting love. Now, what's the difference between a love where I'm looking closely at my beloved or closely at myself, to be distinguished from loving from a distance? So let's imagine now for a moment, and it's so in all of our lives, that there's somebody whom we love. We love, or we love ourselves. Nothing wrong with loving ourselves. It's hard to love another unless one doesn't have love for oneself. That's the meaning of love thy neighbor as thyself. It's hard to love another if I don't know and appreciate myself. Let it always be in a humble way. But if I look closely at myself, if I look at the mirror and I just put my nose into the mirror, I may be very disappointed. I'm going to see warts. I'm going to see wrinkles. I'm going to see all kinds of marks that my children are telling me I've got to get checked out right away. When we look at somebody whom we love and we look very, very closely, what does one see? What does Toby see? You could see the bad traits, the bad habits. You could see the bad stuff. That's the way it is. Now, I know love is in the details, but if I'm going to look very, very closely, that's going to become the message, and that could overwhelm whatever the relationship, that could define the relationship. God says, I am looking at you from a distance. Because if I look at a person whom I love from a distance, then from a distance, even though there may be some dark spots that I don't care for, but from a distance, the dark spots are overwhelmed or eclipsed. They're eclipsed by the larger love. So a lot of love depends upon how do we look upon the other. You know, I've shared this with you. One of the nouns that describes a beloved is Reya. That's the only term for beloved that we use under a wedding canopy at a chuppah. Sameach to samach, be joyous, be happy, Re'im ha'ahuvim. Why is that noun used? Why not chaverim, chaverot? Why Re'im? Re'im comes from the word ra. The shoresh, the root is resh ayin ayin. It means real love is notwithstanding the ra, notwithstanding the deficiency, I still love you. My love is it's close, but it's from a distant. And it just dawned upon me that we have these two texts about the land of Israel. One is a text in Leviticus, in Vayikra, where we come into the land, Kitavo it's Canaan, Asher ani noten lachem lachuzah, and there's a negat sarat. Inevitably, there's going to be something wrong. And you come into the house, the Torah says, and one says, Kinega nira li babayit. Oh, it's all a problem. But then we have this text in Jeremiah, and sometimes the prophets can be an expansion of a biblical story. I view every text in the Bible, in the prophets, I think has at its roots some kind of biblical narrative or biblical sentence, even if it's a legalistic sentence. But sometimes the prophet is offering a response to the Bible as time evolves. And the prophet is saying, rather than looking so close, without pushing away the hope that the area of the negative can maybe be worked on and become a positive. This is not a kumbaya kind of talk. But in love, it's also healthy. God says, I see you from a distance. We say to our beloved, I see you from a distance. Avat olam avtich. This is really a cornerstone of my humble understanding of life, of whatever we do in life. Let me give you just some very personal examples. I love the Bayit. It's been 50 years. It's in better hands today than ever before. Have there been moments of disappointment? Of course. Have there been moments when people have been disappointed in me? Of course. Have there been moments when maybe there's something that unfolded that I was not happy with? But when I step back, what a blessing. What a blessing. And let's think about our own lives, our own relationships with people. There's something powerful about stepping back, not looking too close. Then the negative of what's close, as I said before, can be eclipsed by the larger love. So I wrote this piece recently about Israel because I was noticing that many of my colleagues were writing pieces from America too. And the pieces could have been called, I'm worried about Israel. And there's a lot to worry about. The judicial reform, separation of church and state, which is a very, very big issue for me. The issue of, is it correct that veterans who should be doing reserve time in the Army are saying we're not going in because of political reasons in both directions? There is what to worry about. But in this piece, I said, just for a moment, let's step back. Merachok. Let's look at the land of Israel from afar, not some close, and let's sing the song Dayenu, Dayenu, from the Pesach Seder. What is Dayenu? In Dayenu, we say to God the following: oh God, if you only did this little thing for me, that would have been enough. If you only did that little thing for me, that would have been enough. Now, the exercise of Dayenu is an exercise which requires that we not take for granted the little things that we often don't pay attention to. It means that I've got to understand the miracle of the stuff that's so central, but without which one could not be. It's a very important exercise. Sometimes the miraculous is so everyday that we don't appreciate it. We simply do not appreciate it. And so the suggestion that we made was, why not, in the spirit of what we've studied today, Merachok nireli, like my mama used to say, if you've got nothing good to say, don't say it. Now, again, I want to repeat for the second time. I know there's stuff to be worried about and stuff that have to be worked out. And I know that right on this session, there are people on the political right and people on the political left, even though I'm fond of saying, as you've heard me say recently, ani kitzoni, I am an extremist. Lo ala smol velo ala yamin. I'm not an extremist to the left and I'm not an extremist to the right. I am an extremist in the mitzvah of Ahavat Yisrael. I am an extremist in loving my whole family. Right, left, up, down. Can we write our own Dayenu? So I want to throw out there a couple of dayenus for your consideration and ask maybe you'd like to add to the list. First dayenu about Israel. When Israel was established, there were 600,000 Jews in the land. That was about 3 to 4% of the Jewish population 3 years after the Shoah. Today, there are 9 million people, maybe more, living in Israel today. Over 7 million are Jews. That is almost 50% of the world's Jewish population is living in Israel. That is an increase. I asked the mathematicians to figure it out. That's unbelievable. Merachok nireli, when I step back and I look at that, and when I think about who comprises that population, we have in the last 75 years, this is the 75th anniversary, a few days ago, the largest freedom movement of the Jewish people, the freedom of Soviet Jewry. I believe that freedom movement was on par with the exodus from Egypt. It probably was a greater and bigger movement. And they came to Israel and were absorbed in Israel with all of the issues. The Aliyah of Soviet Jewry from the former Soviet Union turned around Israel. I think that marked the beginning of it becoming the startup, technological, medical, one of the lights for the whole world. But what about the freedom of Ethiopian Jews? With all of the demonstrations and 150,000 of our Black brothers and sisters made Aliyah from Ethiopia. And with all of the issues, they've been integrated. And thank God, Black marrying white, white marrying Black. That's the ultimate test. That's the ultimate need. And when they were brought to Israel, I put this into the piece, a little shtuch. They weren't brought in the bowels of ships to become slaves as they were when they were taken to America. They were flown to Israel to be free. Dayenu. Or let's consider for a moment the Hebrew language. Hebrew language is so important. Language. 150 years ago, I may be exaggerating, but I think we could have put all the people who spoke Hebrew fluently into one Riverdale apartment building, maybe a big one, the white one. That was it. Today, the language of Hebrew is alive. It's thriving. It's alive. People agree in Hebrew. People disagree in Hebrew. People talk softly in Hebrew. People talk loudly in Hebrew. People pray in Hebrew. People love in Hebrew. The rebirth of the Hebrew language, Dayenu. And I'll add one other point to the religious community, who often is too critical of Israel. There is no place at any time that equals the amount of learning Torah that is occurring in Israel today. Let me say it more simply. There is more Torah being learned in Israel today, in the land of Israel, than has been learned any time in any place in all of Jewish history. Now, I've not gotten to the other stuff of the freedom. Just imagine 200,000 Jews came together one night, pro-judicial reform, 200,000 Jews, anti-judicial reform. Try that in Gaza. Try that in PA land. Try that in Syria. Try that in Iran. That's no small matter. And with all the issues, Israel is a democracy with an army that lives and breathes the message of Toah LaNeshek. We just had a situation now in our community, dear friends, I have children who went to Israel for the year, and a young woman, Hani, she was jogging, she was hit by a bus. And when I was in touch with the family, Hani is now at Hadassah, she had to go through serious surgery. I said, I'll tell you one thing, the surgery, the medicine, the doctors like the Jessies, the highest quality. I'm not even talking about that, the obvious that we couldn't get around without Waze, which is of course a Jewish invention. They've just invented in Israel how somebody in a wheelchair can maneuver the wheelchair so the person can stand. There was an individual who apparently invented it for the first time. He was able to stand up, could never stand up, and somehow this has been brought to the scene. We need to sing. We need to sing Dayenu. And that's what I'm dedicating this class to. I'm not a lo noladati etmol. I wasn't born yesterday. Like everyone, I'm fully aware of the issues before us. But on this Yom Ha'atzmaut, with all that is yet to be done, the piece that I want to write is not, I'm worried. I'm proud. I'm proud of what Israel has accomplished. And I think one of the greatest blessings in life is to know we're blessed. One of the greatest blessings in life is to know you're blessed. We are so blessed. I don't remember a day when there was not a state of Israel, even though I was born 4 years before there was a state of Israel. It was a time when there was no state of Israel. And we are blessed. And it's not always that a person in life can see one's dreams be fulfilled, even partially fulfilled. And we're seeing that. So just for a moment, I'm calling for Meirachok Nireli. Jeremiah says, I've loved you with an everlasting love because I'm evaluating that love from a distance. In love, I write, we sometimes can be disappointed when looking too closely at our beloved. For that matter, we can become depressed when looking at ourselves too closely. Love means being kind to our beloved and to ourselves. God shows the way by looking at us from afar. Seeing the broader picture, he declares, my love for you is everlasting. The same principle applies to Israel. Looking close, it has its negatives. The walls appear to be afflicted, but that's not the whole picture, which we see more clearly when we gaze through a wider lens. With all of Israel's challenges, it is a beautiful land with a beautiful people. Torat, this esoteric concept, the leprosy of walls, teaches that in our personal lives, in our relationship to Israel, the Nireli, it appears to me, of close up, should morph into the Nireli of afar. I want to stop here, and I want to get your thoughts and your reactions and your pushback, by all means.
I see Fern's hand and Estelle's hand to start with. And Arnie. Fern, Estelle, and Arnie.
Okay. I remember, Rav Avi, during COVID, you taught us a bracha that you said every morning, where appreciate what you have, thank God for your blessings that you have, and don't focus on what you don't have. And I think we apply this same philosophy to Israel. We have to appreciate what they have. And yes, things need to get improved like anything, but I think we have to focus on what's good about it, like focusing every morning on what we have that's good, and don't focus on what we don't have anymore.
Yes. Thank you, Fern.
There's one thing that I wanted to say. It's sort of interesting. After the state was established, my husband said that it didn't matter whether or not he lived there or what his future will be as long as he knows that his children could be there. And although circumstances came about that he could not live there, at least his children live there. And that's one of the these sort of legacies that the people in our generation were able to pass on to the next generation. So
And
that's it.
it's an extraordinary legacy, and you're living it, Estelle. Your children are in Rehovot, and it's wonderful. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts, Tova?
Arnie's next.
Arnie?
So I was thinking about the video that was shown in the beginning. And when you were talking about love, a loving relationship, to me, every relationship has music to it that goes beyond where the words go. It's a dimension that, you know, if you're lucky enough to experience, it's magical. And I was thoroughly affected when I heard the singing of those people, you know, before the class. And I just believe that, like I said, every relationship has its music. And if you listen to the music, you can experience the fullness of love in its depths and its heights.
Yes. Thank you, Arnie. Thank you. Jesse, I want to hear what you have to say because you're living it every day. Is Jesse on? No.
Yeah, Rav Avi.
Beautiful lesson. And thank you, of course, and bless you, of course, for being an extremist of Ahavat Israel. And yes, Israel needs a lot of love now. If we start with criticism and end with blessing, I give a minor criticism in that those who know I spent a lot of time in Ethiopia setting up Mivtza Shlomo as a kind of
Tell us
undercover
about that,
Israeli.
Jesse. Tell us about that.
Well, I was sent pretending to be an American by the Israeli army in order to set that up. And the very minor criticism, really trivial about what you said, but is important to some people, maybe none who are here now, is that Ethiopians do not consider themselves Black. Ethiopians are not Black people. They believe themselves to be chocolate colored, and probably everyone here likes chocolate. And part of the reason of that is that Ethiopians were never sold into slavery. They never agreed, and the Ethiopians considered those other nations near them to be Black because they agreed or were sold into slavery. But that's a very minor point. And yes, Israelis, of course, marry Ethiopian to whiter, blonder, or darker. Jewish, of course, in Israel can only marry Jewish. But obviously Ethiopian Jews with every other kind of Jew. I think you gave a beautiful description of Mitzvah, but for those who know, I'm a doctor. So medical doctors, of course, have looked at this many times. Not that Sarat is leprosy, as we call leprosy today, but that it's a disease or a skin disease, although it can be the concept of slander. But I think if I could add anything to what you said, there's these two hands that we have. And one, of course, is to look very closely and to do the curative and especially the preventive medicine when there's something small. So if you think there's something small, So take care of it soon and don't wait for it to be late. But then on the other hand, to have the big picture and to look at the whole person and to look over the context of the times. And that does deal with the person and their health. And that's why Torat has been described as the pshat of a disease like a leprosy. But that's also true for the
Hello?
body,
Yeah.
Rabbi,
the home.
Yeah.
this is Alma.
Are you on a meeting?
Okay.
You're on a meeting?
Rabbi,
Yes, Salman.
Zalman, I have a hot day today. I'm back in the meeting. Okay.
Okay. I
You won't believe it.
don't know if you can put your hands on it. First, Jess, thank you. There was a beautiful clip that I saw in the morning that touched me so deeply. And it's a clip of the D family. If any of you have seen it, if there's a way we can put it up, I'm not sure. I certainly don't know how to do that. But it's a clip of the D family sitting, and Leo, the father, is on one side of the bench, and then he's sitting near his daughters. And near the two daughters, there's a woman, and the woman was the recipient of Lucy, the mother's heart. And there's a stethoscope on her heart, and one of the daughters is listening to the heartbeat. And wow, it was like, even in death, trying to give meaning to life. It's remarkable, something to think about if ever we doubted if we can give organs to those so people can live. It's something to really think about. So Shuli, I don't know if you can find it, but and I don't know how to send it to you, but
It didn't immediately come up. I just did a search. So
yeah. You know who has it? Eitan has it. Eitan sent it out. My Eitan. So
I'll reach out to him now.
did you see it, Jesse? You're on mute, Jess.
Quiet mutes. I would add a siftach thanking you for mentioning my brother-in-law, Effie, of blessed memory, and talk about the long picture, as you mentioned, because sometimes things only come up because of the trauma of the moment, only after a long time. And this year, the day of Memorial Day, and then the next day again, two people showed up, one who had been a colleague of my brother-in-law. They had both been artillery officers directing the artillery fire from tanks. And that's how my brother-in-law was killed. And 41 years later, his closest co-worker in the army showed up and told us a lot about him. So sometimes mirachok, the Ahavah finally is expressed. And then the next day, amazingly, the Magad, the battalion commander, showed up after 41 years saying, well, at the time of war, and often this happens, we're distracted at the time of a conflict. You kind of lose perspective, or you have a very narrow perspective, and it can be traumatic. And then 41 years later showed up. This fellow had been Mankal Misrad Datot. He went quite far, and had been Effie's commanding officer, and showed up and added a lot. And that was very important to Noga, to Effie's brother, and to me, and to the rest of the family and our children. And over time, these things are the perspective we gain over time is very important. And obviously, you touched on that very nicely too.
Thank you, Jess. And Noga's father worked for Zim Lines, right? Was he?
Yeah, he was president of Zim America, and then deputy CEO of Zim in Israel.
I see.
But he would have been over 100 now if he was still alive. No longer. Father and mother no longer alive. One sister is still alive.
Tova, did you want to say something? I know you're so,
Rabbi, I'm sorry. I also want to hear if Tova has something to say, but actually Eitan sent me the video.
okay, can you show that? I just think
I'm gonna
people-
try, yeah.
It's really very, get ready. It's very, very moving.
Let me just see. Oh, I gotta log back in. Give me 1 second. Sorry, just 1 sec. Da-da-da-da-dum. Oh, let me stop sharing. You don't have to see this. And while I'm setting it up, then someone else can give a comment, and then I'll open it up. Okay, or just wait for me. It's fine. I got it. Okay, I'm ready to share it, I think.
So
Okay.
let's trade.
You could
Let's
speak
trade
up
six.
now.
That's
You don't-
okay.
Don't bend over like that.
No, don't sit on Ted's lap.
I'm gonna switch with you.
Okay.
Make it very difficult.
Here we go. If everyone can mute themselves.
Okay, you can go.
No, I just, you can sit over.
Thank you, Shuli.
That's Israel. Yep.
Did I miss anybody's hand? I see Bev.
May I speak now? Okay, I'd like to say that everything you say is true. Fortunate beyond words that we are living in a time where we can see the concrete Israel. It's not just a hope, but it's a reality. But I say concentrating on that leads many people to complacency, to feel that it's nothing more that needs to be done, that they don't have to do it, it's all done already. And the fact is that Israel needs, and Jews everywhere, need a lot of help and a lot of participation of people who are free to do things. And I don't see very much activism. I know that there is some, but I don't see very much activism on behalf of Israel and behalf of the fight against anti-Semitism. I see a lot of complacency. And while it's wonderful to revel in the glory of what we have, we can't forget what we don't have, because we need the participation and the help of everyone to make things better. And there's plenty of room for making things better. Anti-Semitism in the colleges is raging. All over it's raging. There's a lot of criticism about Israel on campuses, and I don't know how many people wrote to their colleges and asked their presidents of their colleges what they're doing about anti-Semitism on their campuses.
You did mention that you did.
I did. there is a lot yet to be done. And I would hope that everyone would count their blessings and make sure that the same blessings exist for the generations to come.
Very well said, Bev. Very well
Can I
said.
say something? May I say
Yeah.
something?
Of course,
Am
Salman.
I?
Yes.
Okay. If you don't know, but I get magazine for the AMFDA, and there's most of the contributions made come from people from the United States and in Israel. Because the one thing I did a couple of things I'm proud of. The Marcus Blood Bank. When I was a child, I used to hemorrhage a lot, and so I gave money to the underground blood bank, the Marcus Blood Bank. And also, there's another thing too. I give too, which there's a thing called the breast milk thing. There's a breast milk bank that's very important to give to most of the stuff from Eretz Yisrael has come from people from outside of Eretz Yisrael. So I try to do the white spinach, do things like that. We can do good, do positive things like that. And that's if you've never heard of, if you know the American Friends of Morgan David and Adam, they have a lot of projects to do, and most of them are supported by Americans in the diaspora, but because Israel can't afford it, so we contribute a lot of those things. Those two things at least. Some people buy ambulances, things like that. So we do a lot of things for the good part of Israel, the positive part. That's my contribution.
Thank you, Zalman. And I know it's so appreciated. I wanted to close first. Thank you to everybody. And that most recent clip, so moving. My goodness. A young woman, she had the stethoscope in her ears. So she was listening to her mother's heart that was given to give life to someone else. I did want to mention, Shuli, could you read what we sent out to the press? I just wanted you to be aware of something, just jumping. We saw a piece about apparently there's going to be an auction of maybe the most valuable cachet of jewelry, but it's basically blood money. That's basically what it is. So I just wanted you to hear this little press release we sent out. I sent it out with my wonderful friend Steve Lieberman, who's a great lawyer, and we're looking for descendants of Jewish department stores back in the 30s, which the Nazis forced the owners to sell at fire sale prices, and then they took the money and they amassed a tremendous amount of jewelry, and that jewelry is now going to be auctioned off. And so Steve believes that if there is a claimant, that God willing could that if there is a claimant, it could be a claim against the estate. If you can just read that, Julie, and we'll end with this. I just wanted you to be aware of this.
This Wednesday, May 3rd, Christie's begins an auction of what it has predicted will be the largest jewelry sale in history. The jewels to be sold at the auction are from the estate of Heidi Horton, an heiress whose jewelry collection was assembled using the wealth of her deceased husband, Helmut Horton. According to a recent New York Times article, during the Nazi era, Helmut Horton laid the foundation for his wealth by acquiring companies at fire sale prices from Jewish business owners who were forced to sell. That is, the jewelry being auctioned by Christie's is blood jewelry bought with illicit wealth made by extorting businesses from Jews who were forced by the Nazis to sell what they and their families had spent, in many cases, generations building. That Christie's would sell such jewelry is unconscionable. We urge any heirs of these looted Jewish businesses to contact us about possible claims against the estate of Heidi Horton. The jewels being sold by Christie's were acquired with the wealth derived from what is essentially looted Holocaust-era assets, and therefore may be available to satisfy any judgment against the Horton estate. If such claims are successfully asserted, just as property bought by drug dealers with the money made from selling drugs is routinely seized by United States prosecutors and declared forfeit.
Just wanted you to be aware of that. We're going to try to send that out to the whole buy it, and if
And more, yeah, thank you.
trying to disseminate it as widely as we can.
Yeah.
So I was so taken by that last clip. So I'm a little just wanted to thank you and just my love to everybody. And we're on next week again, God willing. I hope it was meaningful this morning. All my love to everybody. Hi, Greg.
Okay, hi.
Hi, Ezra. How you doing?
Thank God I'm doing it. I got my new YCT sweatshirt, so I'm feeling great.
Oh, wow, that's great. Yeah.